I'm Rick Harp. This is your APTN News Brief for Tuesday, March 19th. The Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations has called out school leaders in Coronach, Saskatchewan for alleged racism and bullying. This after a family shared the story of their 10-year-old son, who's faced years of physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual abuse by classmates, according to the family. Now the boy, who APTN News won't name due to his age, suffers from anxiety, sleep disorders, and recently suicidal thoughts. Federation Vice Chief David Pratt says a plan should be in place to prevent such bullying and better communication between teachers and principals so that no child is afraid to go to school. Something representatives of the FSIN, the family, school staff, and school board are expected to discuss later today at a meeting.
When we're calling upon not only the Coronach and the principal and the teachers and the school board to do a better job, but for teachers and principals and school boards to do a better job across this country.
Still with FSIN, who's made headlines for a rather different reason, a forensic audit. Launched by Indigenous Services Canada, or ISC, the audit will review all departmental monies sent to the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations, stretching back to 2019 up to the present day. The department told APTN News the move is a follow-up to allegations against the FSIN, and in a letter dated March 15th to its leader, Bobby Cameron, ISC says the time period under review could change based on the findings. The Federation represents 73 First Nations across the province. It's headquartered in Saskatoon. In a statement, ISC says the department takes allegations regarding the misuse of public funds very seriously. Meanwhile, the FSIN has not responded to our request for comment, and a Federation representative would not answer questions on the matter at a press conference unrelated to the audit. To Ottawa, where Bill C-92 came up at the House of Commons Standing Committee on Indigenous and Northern Affairs. The Act supports Indigenous control over the delivery of child and family services and outlines national minimum standards of care. It's an act Quebec tried to challenge on jurisdictional grounds, but lost in November at the Supreme Court. Now members of the committee want to know where implementation of the bill now stands. Annette Francis reports.
Witnesses from the Department of Indigenous Services and the Department of Justice began with an overview of the legislation. Then came the Q&A from members of Parliament. There were a few questions about how the implementation process is going to date. But it didn't take long before Conservative MPs Martin Shields and Jamie Schmel hijacked the discussion by introducing a motion to axe the carbon tax.
We'll go to the speaking list. So Mr. Schmel, you're first.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to my colleague Martin Shields for raising that very important motion. As he pointed out, 133 chiefs of Ontario have come out against the carbon tax. We've had multiple premiers, territorial leaders, all speaking about how the carbon tax has increased the cost of living for the people they represent.
After about 5 minutes, Liberal MP Hyman Batiste was able to end the debate on the carbon tax. But when it was NDP MP Leah Gazan's turn, she scolded the Conservatives for their motion.
Biggest issue in our community is child welfare and the fact that our kids are dying in the system, and the fact that the Conservatives in this committee today are talking about life and death and how hard it is for families. I'd like them to come to Manitoba, where 90% of the kids currently in care are First Nations, who are dying in the system, going murdered and missing as Indigenous women, and then we'll talk about urgency. I find it disgusting.
I'm going to stop there. That's not a point of order, but we've just
so that the public knows what games are being played on the backs of the lives of our kids in this committee.
Katrina Peddle is the Director General of the Department of Indigenous Services. She testified that there are now 7 Indigenous governing bodies now asserting jurisdiction over child welfare in Canada. She was asked how long it would take for over 200 more to take control.
That's a very good question. It does depend upon the pace at which communities wish to proceed. So that is in their hands.
Annette Francis, APTN National News, Ottawa.
To Winnipeg.
No justice, no peace. Abolish the police.
Families of 2 First Nations men who died following interactions with city police spoke at a rally Friday to help mark the International Day Against Police Brutality. Calling for an end to such brutality, ralliers said it disproportionately affects Indigenous people. Organized by police abolitionist group Winnipeg Police Cause Harm, they want to see the service's $333 million budget reduced to instead be diverted to affordable housing, safe consumption sites, and non-police crisis response. At least 6 people have died after interactions with Winnipeg Police since October 2023, among them James Wood and Elias Whitehead. Jody Beardy was Whitehead's partner. She says she may never fully heal from his death.
Exactly 5 months ago today, on October 15, 2023, the Winnipeg Police were called to do a wellness check. A wellness check where my partner Elias Whitehead lost his life at the hands of the very people who were supposed to protect him and help him. This loss has left me broken, angry, and searching for answers. How could this happen? How are those that are supposed to serve and protect us have such a disregard for human life?
And finally, the Métis Nation of Alberta recently held a private screening of their upcoming documentary, Finding Justice. It tells the story of the 2020 shooting deaths of Métis hunters Jacob Sansom and Maurice Cardinal. Family of both men were at the screening, so was APTN's Chris Stewart.
The Métis Nation of Alberta wanted to make a documentary on how the justice system has failed. They decided to make their first documentary on the deaths of Jacob Sansom and Maurice Cardinal, but from the perspectives of their family. Roger and Anthony Bilodeau, father and son, are both in prison for their deaths. The family believes both men received too lenient of a sentence, and Roger is already receiving unescorted temporary absences from prison.
Now, on good behavior, Roger should be walking around pretty soon.
They brought in noted writer and award-winning filmmaker Matthew Dykes to make the film. Sharon Bork is the Director of Justice at the Métis Nation of Alberta.
It's the family members sharing their own personal perspectives of what they saw, how they were impacted, how their voices weren't heard, and seeing how the process unfolded. And it really is geared towards the offenders or the accused who's been charged. It's all about their rights, which I totally get. But at the end of the day, more importantly, we should be listening to our families who've been impacted by this tragedy.
And the cops came, and then they asked me to identify pictures of them. And it was pretty rough.
Watching the near hour-long documentary wasn't easy for those closest to Maurice and Jacob. They told APTN that the justice system needs an overhaul.
You had a lot of information that should be put out there about all this stuff so we can make the changes and adjustments to our justice system to make it right.
I was a little bit angry. I was a little bit sad because about the boys. And I was a little bit angry about the justice, the way it was handled.
Ruby Smith was Jacob's mother and Maurice's sister. She says the film didn't pull any punches.
They just hit this documentary head on. They said all the things we couldn't say or didn't know how to say or put together. And then even with this injustice, they nailed all of it. And what the family's going through, how everything, the whole court system dragged us to, put us through, they nailed it.
Irene Forsyth was Maurice's sister and Jacob's aunt.
This movie, the beginning, just brought the chills, made my hair stand up. It was something that I needed to see, something that everybody needs to see.
Matthew Dykes, the writer and director, told APTN that the family was initially reluctant to speak on such a painful part of their lives.
I was nervous beforehand. I wanted them to really like it and to see that I respected everyone's words so much. It was a lot of responsibility, and so I'm really happy that they liked it and that it's going to be seen by a lot of people.
The documentary has a public screening in Edmonton on April 5th and is entered into the Dream Speakers International Festival the week of April 26th in Edmonton. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Bonnyville, Alberta.
And that's your APTN News Brief for Tuesday, March 19th. I'm Rick Harp.